The Misadventures of Larry the Llama. In the quaint town of Meadowbrook, there lived a llama named Larry. Larry was not your average llama. He had an insatiable curiosity and a knack for getting into trouble. From sneaking into the local bakery to sampling Mrs. Jenkins' prize begonias, Larry's escapades were the talk of the town. One bright morning, Larry decided he was tired of the usual llama life and wanted to explore the world beyond his pasture. With a determined gleam in his eye, he hopped over the fence and trotted down the road, his fluffy tail bobbing behind him. As Larry made his way through town, he stumbled upon the farmer's market. The scent of fresh produce and baked goods was too tempting to resist. He trotted right up to a stall selling apples, eyes wide with delight. "Hey, you can't just eat those," shouted the vendor, waving a carrot at him. But Larry, being a llama of discerning taste, deftly grabbed an apple and trotted away, leaving the vendor shaking his head in disbelief. With his stolen snack in tow, Larry continued his adventure. He soon found himself at the local park, where a group of kids were playing soccer. Intrigued by the colorful ball, Larry galloped over, causing the game to screech to a halt. "Is that a llama?" one of the kids exclaimed. Larry, always eager for new experiences, nudged the ball with his nose, sending it rolling across the field. The kids burst into laughter, and soon they were all playing a hilarious game of soccer with their new four-legged friend. After a few rounds, Larry, feeling quite pleased with himself, decided it was time to move on. He meandered through the park and stumbled upon a picnic. Spotting a delicious spread of sandwiches, pies, and lemonade, Larry couldn't resist joining in. "Shoo! Get away from our food," a startled picnic-goer cried, but Larry was undeterred. He carefully selected a sandwich and made a hasty retreat, munching contentedly. As the sun began to set, Larry's adventures were far from over. He spotted the town fair in the distance, with bright lights and lively music drawing him closer. Larry strutted in, head held high, ready to take on the carnival. His first stop was the cotton candy stand, where the vendor had just stepped away. Larry seized the moment and helped himself to a large pink fluff of cotton candy, his fur soon becoming a sticky, colorful mess. Next, Larry wandered over to the Ferris wheel. The ride operator, distracted by a group of teenagers, didn't notice the determined llama stepping into one of the cars. As the wheel began to turn, Larry sat proudly, enjoying the view of the town from above. The townspeople gathered below, pointing and laughing as Larry took his first Ferris wheel ride. "Look at that llama go!" someone shouted, snapping pictures. As the Ferris wheel ride came to an end, Larry disembarked, his thirst for adventure far from quenched. He stumbled upon a talent show and, never one to shy away from the spotlight, trotted onto the stage. The audience erupted in laughter as Larry performed an impromptu dance, his lanky legs and fluffy body moving in perfect, awkward rhythm. The judges, unable to contain their amusement, awarded Larry first place, and he proudly accepted a blue ribbon. As night fell, Larry decided it was time to head home. He retraced his steps through the town, stopping briefly to return a now slightly nibbled apple to the vendor, who chuckled and waved him off. When Larry finally made it back to his pasture, he jumped over the fence and settled in, a contented llama after a day of mischief and fun. The townsfolk, still chuckling over his antics, had grown fond of their adventurous neighbor. From that day on, Larry became a local legend, and every time he wandered into town, he was met with laughter, treats, and endless adventures. Meadowbrook had never been more lively, all thanks to Larry, the llama with a taste for mischief. The Great Goose Caper. In the sleepy town of Willow Creek, there lived a group of geese, led by a particularly clever one named Gus. Gus had a knack for pranks and a reputation for being the town's troublemaker. One sunny afternoon, as the townspeople prepared for the annual fair, Gus hatched his most elaborate plan yet. The fair was the highlight of the year, with stalls full of pies, games, and a prize giant pumpkin contest. Gus, with his fellow geese in tow, waddled towards the fairgrounds, eyes gleaming with mischief. As they arrived, Gus spotted Mrs. Thompson's pie stall. The aroma of freshly baked apple pies wafted through the air, irresistible to the mischievous geese. With a honk, Gus signaled his team to launch their first prank. While the geese distracted Mrs. Thompson by flapping their wings and honking loudly, Gus and the others sneaked around the back, snatching a couple of pies before waddling away triumphantly. Their next stop was the dunk tank, where the mayor was sitting, ready to get dunked for charity. Gus, always up for a challenge, nudged a baseball with his beak, aiming straight for the target. With a perfect shot, he hit the bullseye, sending the mayor plunging into the water. The crowd erupted in laughter, and Gus honked with pride. As the day went on, the geese continued their antics, stealing popcorn from unsuspecting children and sneaking into the photo booth, leaving a trail of feathered selfies. But their ultimate goal was the giant pumpkin contest. Gus had his eye on the biggest pumpkin, grown by old Mr. Jenkins, who guarded it fiercely. With a sly look, Gus hatched a plan. The geese formed a line, honking loudly as they paraded around the pumpkin, distracting Mr. Jenkins while Gus made his move. In a daring heist, Gus managed to peck at the rope holding the pumpkin, and with a mighty tug, it rolled off its pedestal. The geese rallied behind it, pushing it down the fairgrounds, much to the amusement and bewilderment of the townsfolk. "Stop those geese!" Mr. Jenkins shouted, but it was too late. Gus and his gang had rolled the pumpkin all the way to the pond, where it made a perfect splash, floating triumphantly. The townspeople, gathered by the pond, couldn't help but laugh at the spectacle. Even Mr. Jenkins, shaking his head, chuckled at the sheer audacity of the geese. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Gus and his fellow geese celebrated their day of pranks and mischief, honking happily by the pond. The townsfolk, entertained by the day's events, decided to crown Gus the honorary mayor of mischief at the fair's closing ceremony. From that day on, Gus and his gang were the beloved pranksters of Willow Creek, always ready for their next great caper, leaving laughter and honks in their wake. The Adventures of Bert the Bear. In the heart of whimsical woods, there lived a bear named Bert. Unlike most bears, Bert was notorious for his love of honey and a particular knack for getting into the most unusual predicaments. His adventures were legendary among the forest animals. The honey heist. One day, Bert woke up with a craving for honey. But not just any honey. He wanted the golden honey from the beehives of Old Oak Hill, known to be the sweetest in the forest. Determined, Bert set out on a mission, armed with a makeshift disguise, a beekeeping hat, and a net. As he approached the hives, Bert put on his hat, convinced it made him look just like a beekeeper. "They'll never know the difference," he muttered to himself. With a confident swagger, he approached the buzzing hives. But the bees, not fooled by Bert's disguise, swarmed out in a cloud, buzzing angrily. Bert, in a comical dance of panic, waved his net around, hoping to fend them off. In a flurry of fur and buzzing, Bert tumbled down the hill, landing in a muddy puddle. Covered in mud, but undeterred, Bert spotted a nearby stream and decided to wash off. As he splashed around, a group of curious fish watched him, amused by the muddy bear trying to clean himself. The fishing fiasco. After cleaning up, Bert's attention turned to the sparkling fish in the stream. "Why not catch some fish for dinner?" he thought. With newfound enthusiasm, he fashioned a fishing rod from a branch and some vines. Bert's idea of fishing was less about skill and more about sheer determination. He cast his line with all his might, only for it to get tangled in a nearby tree. Undeterred, Bert climbed up the tree to free his line, only to find himself stuck among the branches. As he dangled from the tree, trying to untangle the line, a group of squirrels gathered below, chittering in amusement. "Need a hand, Bert?" one of them called up, barely containing his laughter. With a huff, Bert finally managed to free himself and tumbled back to the ground. "Fishing's overrated anyway," he grumbled, as the squirrels chuckled and scampered away, the picnic pandemonium. Feeling a bit dejected, Bert wandered through the woods until he stumbled upon a clearing where a family of campers had set up a picnic. The smell of sandwiches and fresh fruit was irresistible. With a mischievous glint in his eye, Bert decided to join the picnic. He ambled over, plopping down on the picnic blanket as if he were an invited guest. The family, startled at first, couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the large bear sitting politely, eyeing the sandwiches. Bert, ever the gentleman, took a sandwich, giving the family a nod of thanks. As they snapped photos and laughed, Bert, enjoying the attention and the food, struck a pose, becoming the star of their vacation album, The Talent Show. As the sun began to set, Bert noticed a sign for the annual Forest Talent Show. Perfect, he thought, deciding to showcase his juggling skills. After all, he had been practicing with pine cones in secret. When Bert's turn came, he stepped onto the makeshift stage, a confident grin on his face. Using colorful fruit from the picnic, he began to juggle. The forest animals gathered, cheering and clapping as Bert juggled, twirled, and even tossed in a few dance moves. Halfway through his act, a mischievous raccoon decided to add to the fun, tossing a few more fruits at Bert. Unfazed, Bert incorporated them into his routine, his paws a blur of motion. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, the mudslide finale. Just as Bert was finishing his act, he slipped on a stray banana peel, sending him sliding down a muddy hill right into a patch of wildflowers. Covered in petals and mud, Bert popped up, striking a triumphant pose as the audience roared with laughter. The talent show judge, a wise old owl, awarded Bert the grand prize, a golden acorn trophy for best comedy act. Bert, holding the trophy high, took a bow, grateful for his friends and the fun-filled day. The legend of Bert. As Bert made his way back home, trophy in hand, he felt content. His day of mishaps and adventures had brought joy not only to himself, but to everyone in Whimsical Woods. From that day on, Bert the Bear was not just known for his love of honey, but also as the lovable prankster and star performer of the forest, always ready for his next hilarious adventure. And so, life in Whimsical Woods continued, with Bert's antics bringing smiles to the faces of all his forest friends, who eagerly awaited the next chapter in the adventures of their favorite bear. The Great Garden Gnome Heist. In the quaint village of Sunnydale, garden gnomes were prized possessions. Each lawn proudly displayed quirky, colorful gnomes in various poses. However, for Max, the town's mischievous fox, these gnomes presented an irresistible opportunity for a prank. The master plan. One sunny afternoon, Max gathered his friends, a wise old owl named Oliver, a playful raccoon named Rosie, and a timid squirrel named Sam. "We're going to pull off the greatest prank Sunnydale has ever seen," Max declared, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "What's the plan?" asked Rosie, already excited. "We're going to gather all the garden gnomes and host a gnome parade," Max explained, envisioning the hilarity that would ensue. The gnome gathering. As night fell, the group set off on their mission. They tiptoed through the neighborhood, snatching gnomes from every garden. Oliver kept watch from above, hooting warnings if anyone approached, while Sam scurried nervously, keeping lookout. "Why are these gnomes so heavy?" grumbled Rosie, dragging a particularly large one. "They're well fed," Max joked, urging his friends to keep moving. By dawn, they had amassed a collection of gnomes, each with its own unique character. There were gnomes fishing, gnomes reading, even one playing a tiny banjo. The team gathered them all in the village square, ready for the grand parade, the gnome parade. With the first rays of sunlight, the villagers woke to find their gnomes mysteriously missing. Confused and curious, they followed a trail of tiny footprints leading to the square. There, they found Max, Rosie, Sam, and Oliver proudly arranging the gnomes in a parade formation. Each gnome was meticulously placed, creating a whimsical scene of a gnome festival. The villagers burst into laughter, snapping pictures and cheering for the clever prank. Max, wearing a makeshift conductor's hat, paraded around, pretending to lead the gnome band. The gnome games. Seeing the joy in the villagers' faces, Max had another idea. "Let's have gnome games," he announced. The villagers eagerly joined in, arranging obstacle courses and races for their gnomes. There was a gnome sack race, where villagers hopped alongside their gnomes, and a gnome tug-of-war, where tiny ropes were tied to their arms. Even the shy Sam joined in, cheering from the sidelines. Rosie, always competitive, set up a gnome scavenger hunt, hiding small items around the square. The villagers laughed and searched, bonding over the shared silliness. The Gnome Awards. As the day wound down, it was time for the award ceremony. Oliver, perched on a tree branch, hooted as Max handed out homemade trophies, best dressed gnome, funniest pose, and most athletic gnome. Each winner was met with cheers and applause. The villagers, grateful for the unexpected fun, thanked Max and his friends. "You've brought so much joy today," sighed Mrs. Thompson, whose gnome had won Best Dressed, the return of the gnomes. As evening approached, Max and his team helped the villagers return the gnomes to their rightful gardens. "We'll have to do this again sometime," Rosie said, grinning from ear to ear. "Absolutely," Max agreed, tail wagging. "Maybe next time, a gnome fashion show, the legend of Max the Fox." From that day on, Max was not just the town's prankster, but a beloved figure, known for his creativity and playful spirit. The Great Garden Gnome Heist became an annual tradition in Sunnydale, bringing the community together in laughter and fun. As for Max, he continued planning his next big adventure, always ready to bring a smile to his friends' faces, knowing that sometimes, a little mischief is just what the village needs. The Great Chicken Coop Caper. In the peaceful village of Cluckington, life revolved around the beloved chicken coop. Every day, the villagers would gather fresh eggs, enjoy clucking conversations, and watch the antics of their feathered friends. But for a clever little fox named Felix, the co-op was a source of endless curiosity. The sneaky plan. Felix had always been fascinated by the chickens, but his motives were purely mischievous. One day, while lounging by the river, he hatched a plan to sneak into the coop and cause a bit of chaos. "I'll stage the ultimate chicken coop caper," he declared to his best friend, Penny the playful raccoon. "What do you have in mind?" Penny asked, eyes twinkling with anticipation. "A fake chicken heist," Felix replied, outlining his elaborate scheme. The chicken heist. Under the cover of night, Felix and Penny set out for the co-op, their hearts pounding with excitement. Felix donned a comically large fake mustache and tiny cape, while Penny wore a burglar mask for effect. As they approached the coop, the chickens were nestled in their nests, clucking softly in their sleep. Felix tiptoed inside, using his tail to gently nudge open the door. Penny followed, holding a small sack. Carefully, they placed rubber eggs in the nests and swapped the real eggs into their sack. The plan was to make the chickens believe they had lost their precious eggs in a daring heist, the morning surprise. The next morning, the villagers were greeted by a scene of bewilderment. Chickens clucked in confusion as they discovered the rubber eggs, and the villagers scratched their heads, trying to solve the mystery of the missing eggs. "Who could have done this?" wondered Old Man Jenkins, scratching his beard. Felix and Penny watched from a distance, snickering behind a bush. Their prank had worked perfectly, and the village was buzzing with chatter about the great chicken heist, the investigation. Determined to solve the mystery, the villagers formed an investigation team, led by Detective Hoot, the wise old owl. Hoot, wearing a tiny detective hat, examined the scene, noting the rubber eggs and the footprints leading away from the coop. "These tracks look suspiciously like fox and raccoon footprints," Hoot mused, glancing towards the bush where Felix and Penny were hiding. Realizing they might be caught, Felix and Penny decided to divert the investigation. With a swift flick of his tail, Felix released a fake trail of feathers leading towards the forest. "Look, clues!" shouted one of the villagers, and they all rushed off, following the feather trail. The great reveal. With the villagers distracted, Felix and Penny sneaked back to the coop and returned the real eggs, placing them carefully in the nests. The chickens, still puzzled, watched with curiosity. The villagers returned shortly after, empty-handed and confused. "The trail led nowhere," they exclaimed, scratching their heads in disbelief. That's when Felix and Penny decided it was time for the grand reveal. Emerging from behind the bush, they strutted towards the coop, holding the rubber eggs triumphantly. "It was us," Felix declared, bowing dramatically. The great chicken coop caper was just a prank. The villagers burst into laughter, relieved and amused. "You little tricksters." Old Man Jenkins chuckled, shaking his head. The coop celebration. To celebrate the successful prank, the villagers hosted a co-op party, complete with music, games, and plenty of treats for all. Felix and Penny, now the stars of the event, entertained everyone with their tales of the heist. Even the chickens joined in, clucking happily as the villagers danced and laughed. Detective Hoot, amused by the clever prank, awarded Felix and Penny with a Best Tricksters ribbon. The Legend of Felix and Penny. From that day on, Felix and Penny became the playful pranksters of Cluckington, always ready with another funny scheme. The Great Chicken Coop Caper became a cherished story, retold with laughter and fond memories. And in the heart of Cluckington, the villagers knew that no matter what mischief came their way, it always ended in joy and a sense of community, thanks to their favorite fox and raccoon duo.